Alright, I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of InDesign. Since we missed class yesterday, I wanted you guys to have a pretty good understanding of this program. InDesign is really great for doing any sorts of layouts that you guys would mostly you're going to find you're going to use for your portfolios. It's used for like book layouts and magazine layouts. It's mainly used in like the publishing industry, but for architecture, you're going to want to learn this program mainly for portfolio layout because it's something that you'll send to the printers and they'll understand the format, as well as you can use it for your large format like board prints that you might have because it's really flexible in laying out images and text, and that's sort of what it's made for. It's not made for creating any sorts of graphics or anything, but it's made for just laying out images you've already created in um, Illustrator or Photoshop or PDFs. And the really beneficial thing about InDesign is that it can take any sort of file format and you can place it in there, and it can have uh, ability to update once you've updated. So, say if you have an Illustrator file, you can place it in here, like linking it in is what it's called. And when you update the file in Illustrator, it can automatically sort of link in and replace with the newest file, like you guys saw with the SketchUp and layout. Same sort of thing here. Um, so when you guys open up InDesign, you'll see a screen like this. And so we'll look at a sort of layout that you guys would use for your final prints. And then maybe real quick, we'll go over like a portfolio sort of layout style. So we're going to go over here and we're going to go ahead and go to new. And then, so this is sort of the document setup that comes up here. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we have intent to print, we have number of pages, we have a start page, and then we have our page size. So number of pages is pretty obvious. Let's go ahead and just type in 10 to get started here. And then start page, we're going to say 1. What we're going to do right now is, because we're going to do this for a print that we're going to pin up, we're not going to do facing pages. Facing pages are like when you guys open up a book and there's a page on the one side and there's a page on the other side. It's like a spread. We can look at that after, but right now we're going to turn off facing pages. And then for page size, we're going to go ahead and change that to tabloid. You can see mine sort of comes in points here. If you are unsure tabloid, you can go ahead and type in 17 inches. And you can type in 11 inches. So you can see it's still sort of the same number. You can change portrait or landscape, same sort of thing. Columns here is if you want to set up a sort of table. And we can do like columns throughout the page. This is not something that I've ever used, and I don't think it's something you're going to use either. Margins is something you're going to want to have a good handle on. And so margins is like when you create a document, there's like sort of print margin areas. And if for you guys, what you guys are doing, you're printing and you don't have access to what's sort of called a full bleed printer. And full bleed is when an image is printed out and there's no little white border around. And usually how that's done is that there's, say if you're going to do a full bleed on a regular 8.5 by 11, you'd make the image bigger than 8.5 by 11. It would be printed on 11 by 17 and then cut out. Since you guys are using 11 by 17s, we're not going to do anything with full bleeds, but I will show you what that means down here afterwards. So we're going to go ahead and set up print margins, and it's sort of areas to kind of have all of your text and images fall within, so you know that something's not going to print off the page. So right now I like to just go ahead and use like either a quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch. So let's go ahead and use a quarter of an inch. So I'll go 0.25, and you can see there's a little link here. And that's going to go ahead and link all of them. So when I change one, they'll all change. So you can see that all changed to this weird points, but I typed in 0.25 inches. So you can kind of just double check that, 0.25 inches. And see, that's actually the correct one. So if you come down here to bleed and slug, so bleed is sort of like I mentioned before. It is the like if you want to have an image be printed out where you don't have any white margins around it, you can set sort of a bleed and slug area, and that's for the printer to sort of know that's sort of where the image is dragged to, and they know sort of where to cut out based on both of these bleed and slug. So one's going to be the 8.5 by 11, where the bleed might be, say, like 8 3/4 by 11 1/4. We can look at that like a specific bleed image later, but for what you guys are doing, it's not something that's really necessary right now. So let's go ahead and we can hit OK. And you can see it's going to bring up our page here in the background. Let's go ahead and fill out the screen here. And so if I zoom out, I'm holding Alt and I'm kind of scrolling my wheel back. That's something you guys can't see in these videos. But you can see I have my 10 pages here. And they're all individual spreads. And so this is sort of what we want to have for our, our layouts for our final that we're going to work towards. And so one thing I want to go ahead and do right here, up there here, there's some rulers. You can see this is sort of set into points. So I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to change it to inches. Right click on this one and change it to inches. I'm not really sure why it comes in like points. It's something that you can kind of set up, but I always just change it once I'm in the program here. And so looking at the interface here, you can see there's some of the same tools that you've seen in Illustrator, and a lot of that stuff kind of carries over in a lot of Adobe programs. We have our tools over here to the left, and then we sort of have like our bars and other tools, sort of tool sets over here to the right. With InDesign, you actually end up using less tools than you use in Illustrator because it's more of like placing images and text. You're not going to be creating any sort of graphics usually in Illustrator or in InDesign, but InDesign is also vector based. So if you do create sort of text and like arrows and lines and you scale it up, it will maintain that, it won't get pixelated or anything. It will maintain that resolution. But one thing you have to sort of know is any images that you bring in here, you're going to want to bring high quality images in. It can't make your images better if the source itself is not good. So like an example of that is when you Google image search and you can search like large or small. And you guys sort of know when you bring in a small image and you try to print it out and stretch it, it gets all pixelated. So you want to kind of make sure that a lot of the images that you're setting up, you want them to be larger than what your final intent is, so you can scale them down and they're going to look really good. You don't want to try to go small to large. So let's go ahead and look at some of the little toolbars over here. So pages, this is sort of like a little thumbnail view of your pages that you have. You can see we can kind of click and we can jump to page 7, jump to page 1, 2. It's just a little kind of thumbnail of what we're looking at overall on the screen here. Layers is sort of the same. Layers you're not going to use to the same extent like you guys did in Illustrator or SketchUp or anything like that, because you're going to really only kind of have a couple things on a page. You're usually going to have like a text layer and then an image layer. I am not too good about keeping up with layers in InDesign because most of the time it's pretty easy to access and move stuff around. But there are times where you're going to find that you might have wanted to, like if I have an image that is a full page here, and then I wanted to put a text box here, I might want to create an image layer and a text layer. And I think we'll go ahead and do that for this lesson just to kind of get into a good habit of it. But really you're going to end up with like 1 or 2 layers at the most, sometimes 3, sort of depending on your layout. Links here is something that we'll get into, and you'll see as soon as we bring an image in, it will show the image and then it will show its sort of source path or like where the file is located. And so one thing that we want to do is we want to gather all of our images into one folder, and we want to make sure that we don't move images in and out of that folder. I'll show you sort of what will happen if you move something. But so we want to be a little bit more organized before we get started. And you can kind of see here I have created a rolling hut folder, and I have put all of my images that I'm going to place in here today in one folder. And so everything's sort of in the same spot. And I'll show you what happens if you move something. InDesign sort of has a hard time finding it, and you have to kind of relink. So you want to be pretty organized before you kind of get started in Illustrator. One thing you kind of see over here is stroke and color, same sort of thing for creating lines or anything like that. It's a little bit less intense than Illustrator because this isn't really a drawing program, it's more of a layout program. So it's kept pretty simple. You can do basic arrows and basic things like that, but it's really just for layouts. Color, you can see there's also color in here, which if I want to do text of a certain color or make a shape of a certain color, I have the same sort of interface that I have in Illustrator. Swatches, so we can go over some swatches some more, but swatches are just like little color cubes, little color squares or basic CMYK colors. And one thing that you guys can do that I can show you later on is you can find swatches online, and they're sort of color sets that go well together. So CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and then the K. I can't think of what the K is off the top of my head right now. You can download these little swatch palettes that people have already sort of organized that go well together, and you can kind of input them into your InDesign file, so you have a nice set of color palette that already works together. And so let's see here. If we go, let's go to it. And I'll show you more about how to install these later. But just for you guys to know, this is also an Adobe website that they've put up where people have created what these swatches are. And you can kind of create your own swatches, and you can kind of find, colors that are complementary, compound, monochromatic, if you want different shades of red. But also what's really kind of cool is if you do the Explorer, you can see people have found colors that sort of go well together. And they have a huge library of things. So if I type in like fall, you can kind of see people have already created a whole bunch of different fall colors. Or if I type in like party or something, they're very specific. So you can see, like, see it's like party. Let's try. There's probably too many for that. Let's try like coffee. So you can see people have kind of gathered these swatch files, and I'll go over exactly how to download these, but if you guys are having trouble finding colors that work out well together, visit this site. It's Adobe Cooler, Kuler, so Kuler, and then you can kind of search by terms. That you can seriously search anything, and there's a ton of colors that come up, and it just kind of helps you kind of find a little bit of guidance when you're, everything's black and white and you want a little bit of color theme. So that's up there, and I'll show you how to import that later, and that will show up right here as like some of your color swatches. So I think you might actually be able to access them through this CC libraries too, but we're going to go ahead and do it the old school way later. So the tools over here, you have the pointer tool, selection tool. You have direct select, which is a lot like Illustrator for being able to select certain points. You have a page tool, gap tool, and pen tool, line tool, and type tool. And then your basic sort of rectangle tool and scissors. So the ones that we're mainly going to use are, you can definitely use the text tool, might use a line tool, and scissors here and there. And then we're going to change this one to eyedropper tool. And so you can see also down here there's a stroke and there's a fill, just like in Illustrator. And so it's the same sort of setup. So like once you guys sort of picked up some things in Illustrator, they carry over to both sort of Photoshop and InDesign. Illustrator and InDesign are pretty similar to one another in the way that they work. So let's go ahead and bring some images in, because there's a couple things I want to go over to set you guys up for success on this. So we can go to File, and then we're going to go to Place. And I have my folder here, Rolling Hut. Let's go ahead and place some elevations. So it's going to, you see, bring a little thumbnail here. I'm going to click and sort of drag. And you can see that that's going to place the file in. The one thing that that is not doing is that is not to any sort of scale, because you can kind of see that I clicked and dragged that in, and so I sort of set the scale. What you want to do is, if you want to bring something in and retain its original size, let's go ahead and delete that. I'm hitting the backspace. I can go to File, and then I can go to Place, and go to Elevation, and if I just click, that's the original size of the image. So if you guys have scaled images, you're not going to want to click and drag. You want to just kind of click and drop. I'll do that again. So File, Place, Elevation, click and drop. And so you can see this is the scale that you guys are going to export sort of from layout, or once you guys have worked in Illustrator, that's sort of maintaining that scale. Where that click and drag is really useful is if, let's say, I go to File and I go to Place, and something like an image, like a photo that doesn't have a scale. Let's use this interior shot. I can click and sort of drag, and you can see then I get that image. That doesn't really matter for the scale. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. So you can see I brought this image in here, and all of a sudden I have in my links now elevation JPEG, right? That's the name of this file here. It tells me a little bit all about it here. The PPI, all of the location of where it's saved, a little bit of all this document info, right? So if I go into my rolling hut here, and like I was saying, if I moved elevation 2, or elevation, and I moved it out of there, I come back in here, you can see I'm going to get this like question mark, like it's like, hey, what's going on? I can't find this link. And it's going to want me to relink and find that same file. So that's why, if I go to export this, it's going to maintain sort of it's going to have like a rasterized fuzzy image. That's how you sort of know that a link is missing. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and put that back in here. And it should kind of update itself and know that it's in the right place. Right? So that's one thing that's really important for you guys to understand, is these links and putting everything kind of in a similar folder and saving it there. Once you move it around, it's sort of hard to locate, or when you go to export this as a PDF, it will be rasterized and be all pixelated. Another thing we can do to avoid that is we can right click and we can say embed this link, right? And so that's going to like place this in this document, right? So now if I go ahead and I move this elevation out, it's no longer linked because it's placed into the document. It doesn't care where it is. It's placed in here. The problem with that is if I updated this photo at all or did any sort of changes, they won't carry over into my updated file here. That might be okay for some of the things that you guys are doing, but I recommend keeping things linked and just being organized, because you're going to come back and you're going to want to update an elevation or something like that, and you're not going to want to have to keep dropping things in and updating them. So we're going to place that back in here. We're going to go to Embed Link, and we have our linked file again. So one thing I can do also, it kind of saves me some time. So say I've spent time placing this image here. I'm going to go ahead and do Control-C or Command-C on Mac, and then right-click here. I'm going to do Paste in Place. So I have these lined up in the exact same place. And I have my other elevation here. So I'm going to go ahead and I can actually click and drag and drop it right into my other image. Right, I'm going to go ahead and do that again. So you can see I have my box here. I can click and I drag it right over top, and it's going to replace that image with my new image here. And one thing for you guys to know that I kind of jumped ahead is all these blue lines and margins, they are just for you to see when you're in InDesign. They will not print. They are just sort of guides, right? And so if I wanted to hide those, I can go into File. I have to kind of remember this is Layout. Oh, sorry, it might be under View, extras so I can hide the frame edges if I want. And then view, I can, where is it? Grids and guides. I can hide guides. So this is sort of what your final page is going to look like. So that's just sort of for you guys to know, but you're going to want to go ahead and leave these grids and guides on because they help, you're in this program to help you sort of set up. So one thing that's pretty cool with InDesign is it gives you a lot of control over image size and image editability. So as you see, if I click on this image here, I get this blue frame around it, right? Which is really, it's not going to change the image size, but what it's going to do is sort of crop the image. So if I go ahead and click this and I pull this in, you can see it's just hiding parts of the image, right? So if I kind of pull this back out, you can see it's going to give me more of the full image here. You can kind of see where the image stops. If I want to adjust the actual image, if I click one more time into the image, like double click, you can see now you get kind of a like a reddish outline, right? Now if I change that, that changes the actual image size, right? So the blue is the cropping area, it's sort of your matting around your image, and your red or brown, whatever color, is the actual size of your image. And so one's going to give you a lot of control. If I click out, I get the blue again. If I double click in, I get the red, right? And so, you know, I kind of don't want to make sure, I want to make sure that I'm sizing things correctly. If I want to size both, if I hold Command and Shift at the same time, or I think it might be Control and Shift at the same time for PC users, I can resize kind of both at the same time. So just by having the blue one and hitting Command Shift or Control Shift and then dragging and dropping, or dragging and kind of resizing. So another thing you can do is if I resize this one box to a very specific size, if I hold Shift, it sort of locks in proportionally. Say I want this to fit into this little box. So I have my cropping area, but I want this to be smaller. I can right click and I go into fitting, and I can say fill frame proportionally, fit content proportionally, or vice versa. There's a whole bunch of options here to get the right fitting. So you can kind of see if I right click, there's a lot of options for what I want to do. So the blue frames and the red frames take a little bit of getting used to. So again, blue frame is for kind of cropping the area, and the reddish brown frame is for actual resizing of the image. So one is accessed by just sort of, it's naturally there, you click on it once. The other one is double clicking into the image and resizing that way. So let's go ahead and place a couple images here. And let's see, one thing that I like to do is I like to drag and drop things in because it saves me a bunch of time. So I'm going to go to copy, and then I'm going to go to paste. I want to go, sorry, paste in place. And I can kind of drag things in. I have this exploded axo. And you can see that that's the natural size of the exploded axo, but I'm going to go ahead and resize that in a minute. And then let's paste in place here. I'm going to drop in a section. Let's drop in a couple of images here. Image one. Interior two. Those are different. And let's play one more. This nice shot. I'm just gonna drag it over top here. Nice shot right there. Okay. So you can see here, I have all of my links. Oh, let's drop in this one thing so I can show you guys the instead of this section here, let's drop in this site plan that we did a while back. So you can see InDesign will let you drop in Illustrator files, Photoshop files, all sorts of stuff, which that's what it's really great for, is that I can drop in sort of working files and then continue to edit them. So when you guys are doing your perspectives, you're going to have Photoshop files, which are PSD files, and you'll have some diagrams, which are Illustrator files. You can drop them right into your boards, just kind of get a general layout, and then you can continue working on them, and then once you save them, it will update it into the final here. So you can see I have a nice little layout here. One thing you can notice is if I zoom in, you can see the quality is really poor, right? One thing to know is that InDesign stays in sort of a draft working view, so you can move kind of quickly through documents. And so if I right-click off of an image and I go to Display Performance, it's usually always set at Typical Display. I could set it on High Quality Display, and you can see things are going to kind of clean up a little bit. This image might just be low quality. So let's look at this one right here. Right, so this is going to be sort of the final quality of this image. So you can see that's high quality. If I did display performance, usually it's typical quality. You can kind of see it gets a little bit pixelated. And it kind of cleans itself up a little bit for high quality. If I did fast quality display, you can see it just kind of replaces everything with these gray boxes. Right? And this is, so if you're thinking about someone who's doing a big, huge magazine layout, they might have pictures and do general sizing of things and lots of text. So they might be hundreds of pages long. They want to move through the document quickly. If you have high quality display, it's going to slow things down. So don't worry if you're looking at something and you're like, the quality looks really crappy, what's going on? It means that it's just sort of the working view. When you export this out of InDesign, it's going to be high quality, or whatever the final quality of the image is that you've kind of put in here. And you can see some of these images I brought in are kind of smaller, and so they are lower quality. So if you want to make sure that whatever images you're creating are really nice final quality. So here, let's use this Illustrator file. You can see this is nice, clean, crisp lines, right? Because Illustrator is vector-based. If I go to Display Performance and I use Typical Display, you can see it's kind of a perfect example. It's still the same image, but it's kind of shitty quality here. And if I go to Fast Quality Display, it's the gray box. High quality this is what the final is going to look like. So I want to go ahead and just leave things on typical, so everything's sort of easy to access and kind of move around. If I wanted to delete a page, I can go into my pages here and click on this one, and I can just kind of right click and say delete spread. I don't need that one. So let's go ahead and lay some things out here. I'm going to put these two images on the same page, so I'm going to shift this one over a bit, and I'm going to copy this one up. Control C or Command C or copy, and then paste. And then I don't need this to be that big, so I'm going to kind of shrink this down. We're going to assume those are the same sizes, and I don't want to see the titles on these. I'm going to put my own titles on. Kind of keep everything in those margins. This one. And let's delete this page. We don't need it. We can kind of let things get bigger than the page here, and then kind of see you can crop the areas down. So we get a site plan that kind of takes up the page, and we'll do some final nice big pictures here. So this is a nice interior picture. And kind of just resizing things here to fit nicely on the page. And so what I meant by full bleed before is if I can have this actual image here, one behind it, and let's actually use that one up here, and then paste in place. We'll resize that one in a second. What I'd want to do is I'd want to expand this past our actual page size here, so you can see here. And this is a little bit big, but you want to make sure that you're expanding past everything that we have here. And one thing that's nice, sort of, so I have this blue area, like I have this blue thing marked out, frame. If I click in there, I can resize, but I can also move the image around within that box, right? So I can have this full screen, full kind of page bleed. It won't print like this because printers have to have margins, but if you sent it to a professional printer, they could do, you could tell them that you want to do full bleed, and they would print on a 12 by 18 and then cut out 11 by 17. This is great for your guys' covers and things like that. So you can see, again, blue is kind of setting my cropping area here, so I brought this in. If I double click, I can resize, but I can also move the image around within that kind of cropping region. Let's go ahead and leave that. That looks pretty nice. And we'll resize this one. So it's probably better over here. It's kind of a right. Let's move these around. And if you hold shift, it's going to kind of let me move things in orthogonally. So you can see we got some nice pictures there. So I got a basic layout of things. And if I want to move this one page, I'm going to move, let's move this page as our top page here. And we're going to go ahead and click and drag it and move it in front. You see a little gray line pop up. I'm going to move that in front. So now I have this kind of nice page. I'm going to move this up a little bit. I'm going to click on this, move it up so I can put a little title right here. So I have this title that I have in here that you can see that I'm going to use, and that I'm going to go ahead and put a rolling hut title here, and then, you know, Mark 225. And let's go ahead and do that now. So let's move this up a little bit. And we're going to use a text tool over here, which you guys have all used before. And I'm going to click and drag a text box right in here. And so I can type in rolling hut final project, or whatever you guys want to type in. Let's just do it, rolling hut. Architects. I'm not a fan of this font, so you can have a lot more access and control over fonts here. Let's use this font here. We have a whole bunch of text options up here, which you guys can play around with. Justification, we're going to move that to the right, and let's make this a little bit bigger. Kind of pull this up a little bit, and we can move these text boxes around. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Maybe make this to a medium font. So you can see I have my font here, I have my little title block. So let's say here I can do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this, Control C, Command C, or whatever you guys want to use, and then paste. If I go ahead, I can use this same, it kind of saves the font information for me. I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to say West Elevation, scale, whatever this is. This isn't the actual scale, 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. Let's make this 12. And if I hold Alt and I click Alt or Option, I can kind of create a copy of that. So again, that's Alt or Option, and if I hold it down, you can see it just like the kind of multiplier in SketchUp. You can kind of hold Alt, Option, and then drag, and I can do north. You can kind of copy that around, and you can place stuff over top so you can see what's on that page. Paste. So I can have it over top of this box. Exploded. And I can kind of pull this. You can have a lot of control over the boxes here. And let's go to do our site plan. So if I go ahead and go to site, type in site plan. And so you can kind of see here what I'm talking about, where I have my text layer and my photo layer on the same. So this is kind of where it's one of those times where it's nice to do things on different layers. So layers here, I can create a new layer. Just like Illustrator, once I select something, I have a little blue box here. I can kind of pull it and drag it up here. Box turns red, and then I have an easier time. Sort of, I can lock layers, and I can only select text if I wanted to, and move things around. If I wanted to create a little, you can see I'm kind of getting some overlapping here. I can create a little white box behind this layer, and I can go the rectangle tool over here and do a white fill, and you can see kind of fills in the whole box here. So I'm going to bring that in a little bit because I don't need to cover the whole thing. So there you go. So I won't get the topo line cutting through. One thing that's also nice, so let's do this. Let's copy this one in. Let's do paste. And cut. So one thing that's pretty cool with InDesign is you can do all of your layouts and even have text fill. So I'm going to create a new text box here. And let's say I want to know what this is going to look like if I have a bunch of text in here. I'll choose my font. Let's do 10. If I click into here, I can go into edit. Make sure it's an edit. Sorry. Type, and then insert fill with placeholder text. And you can see this is going to kind of fill this with Latin text here. And this is really nice because it can kind of give me not only my layout for my images, but also possibly what text will look like once I type in something. So maybe I want it like that, or maybe I kind of want it like this. And that's going to fill to as far as your box is filled. So if I want to have this whole thing filled, and if I was going to actually type out this much, I pull the box down to fill the whole area, and then I go to type, fill with placeholder text, and you can see it's going to fill right at the bottom there. And so you can kind of see we have a couple extra pages here we're going to go ahead and get rid of. We don't need. Holding shift, I can select multiple. So we have our little rolling hut file. Let's go ahead and put a text box over here. Oops, sorry. Same size of the image. And let's do our font. Type fill with placeholder text. And we'll justify this one to the right. So we have a pretty basic little layout here, which is nice. One thing that we might want to do is add our names and our class to each page. And so I could go through and I could type that in and then copy and paste in place. I could do it this way. But it's a little bit tedious of a process, right, to do that. So I could do a copy and then I could paste in place. Some overlap here, sorry about that. Right, it's a little annoying. So this is sort of where master pages come in handy. Let's do, sorry, I'm gonna get this. That white box, cover that. So I'm gonna delete these little name tag things. And so if you look here at pages, right, here's all of our pages, and then you see this thing called a master, right? And what master this will let you do is it lets you create a master page that you can apply that template. So it creates like a template page that you can apply to everything else. So if I click into a master, you can see there's no other pages here. It's just being able to edit that master page. And I'm going to do my text box here. I'm going to say Chris Klein, ARC 225, name and date and all that stuff you normally have. I'm just showing you for an example. So it's down here. Put that in the very bottom corner here. So we've got our little name there, right? And maybe we want to add let's add a little line. Like that, 0.5. So I have my name, everything right. And so if I go back in here, you can see all of a sudden it says there's an A that pops up. There's an A master applied to all of these pages. So all of a sudden now everything's got my name on it. I have some layers that are covering things, but you can see in general, with a little bit of cleanup I can go through. And if I wanted to change that, I'd click back into my master page here. Let's say I want to make that font much smaller. And I might make that a lighter color, lighter like gray. And so if I click back in here, you can see, okay, it's lighter gray now, smaller font. But I can't edit this because I'm no longer in the master page, right? I'm back in my main document here. So that's kind of good for creating a template. So when you have names or titles or things, it's really kind of, this is what it's used for. Is these kind of layouts that you want to apply to things. And you don't want to be able to edit them once you're moving your text and images around. So with that being said, you can see I have one here, which maybe I don't want it on this page. If I go up to my thumbnail here on page 1, I can right click on this and I can say apply master to pages, and I can select none. So you can see now it won't have it on this page, but it will have it on the next page. I can also create multiple master pages. So if I want to create a new master, it will call B master. Say OK. And maybe this one's just got, I don't know, like a little line or something at the bottom. So I can go back into this and I can right click and I can say apply master to pages and I can select B master. And there's our little line at the bottom. And so I have generally good layout here. I don't want to apply the master to this page, so I'm going to say apply master to pages. I'm going to say none. So this is kind of our nice little document. So one thing we can do now is we can go ahead and export this. Well, let's go ahead and save it first. So let's save as, and I'm going to save this in our desktop for right now, and I'm going to say rolling hut. And what that will save, it will save what's called an INDD file, which is an InDesign file. So if I go to my desktop here, you can see it looks like this. So this is sort of a backup file, and this is your rolling hut file. One thing we want to do here, so I'm going to show you a couple quick options, is, so now I can go to File, I can go to Export, and this is going to be a PDF, right? I can export in a couple different formats, but you're going to export in PDF. PDF print. You don't need an interactive PDF, so PDF print, right? And I'm going to call it Save, and then it's going to bring up my export options. There's a whole bunch of options here that you can play around with, but it has presets. Just leave it on high quality print for right now. You can select the pages that you want. One thing that's sort of confusing is if I choose range, you have to type in the numbers like 1 through 3 if you want to type out specific pages. But you're mostly going to want to do all. You're going to do pages, not spreads. You don't need to change any of this stuff here, right? And then I can say export. And it's going to tell me if I have anything that's sort of not working. So overset text means that I have like a text box and that I have typed something too far. I know that I have just filler text, so I can say okay, but if you've actually typed something in the story, you might want to go back and kind of make sure that everything fits within your text box. So then I can go, I'm going to go ahead and check that. And it should start exporting here. And we can see Rolling Hut PDF right here on the desktop. So if I click to open that, so you can see this is the image quality that I brought in, so it's not the best quality. I can kind of scroll down here and you can see I have my nice little document. So you can see I have my images, nice little book here, right? Which is great. So this is if you are exporting your PDF, right? If you're taking your final PDF and you're going to print it, right? If you're going to go right to the printers and print this out. Let's change this one photo out because I'm not a huge fan of that. Let's say, and see, this is what I mean if I go to Images, Search Tools. This is a really nice big image. And I'm going to save it to desktop or my folder. Let's go back into our InDesign file here and let's change this one out because it's kind of a crappy quality image. You kind of click and drag and it should change out this photo here. Oops. Click and drag. And there's a nicer photo. So now we can go ahead and we're going to save that again. So one thing that you guys want to know, so I can go and File, Export PDF. I'm going to save over the other copy, replace, say Export. Okay. It shows me that it's exporting. And right here on the desktop, that's a better quality image. So you can see rolling hut, everything, right? So this is, like I said, if you're going to print something from a PDF, if this is all ready to go, it embeds everything in the image here in the PDF. You can go ahead and print it. If you are going to move an InDesign file, if you're going to say you're working at home and you want to copy this InDesign file onto your thumb drive and go to school and then open it up on a computer, you're going to have an issue because you have a thing called links, right? And so if you are rushing and you throw this just on your thumb drive and you take it to school and you open it up, it's not going to be able to, it's going to like act like it can't find any of the links, right? Because those links probably live on your desktop or your computer at home. They don't live on the school computer. So if you want to take your InDesign file somewhere, if you're going to put it on a thumb drive, what you're going to want to do is called packaging it. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Package, and then you can see it tells me everything that's it's going to sort of put in this. It's going to put my 3 fonts. I have 1 embedded font. I have 8 links. Everything's links. It tells me all about everything. I'm going to say package and just say OK. And then it's going to create an actual folder for me. So I'm going to say package, OK. Same thing with the text. It's going to take a little bit of time. But now if I go to my desktop, I have Rolling Hut folder, right? Or whatever you've titled your project. So it's Rolling Hut. If I click into that, you can see what it's done. It has my InDesign file. It has a final PDF of what I want. And it has all of my links, right? So it has everything packaged, ready to go in a folder. And so and it has my fonts that I've used. If I go to school or move to computers, I want to copy this whole folder onto my thumb drive because it will be able to path back to all of these links and fonts and it will find everything. That is really, you guys, I guarantee you're going to do this multiple times as you're going to copy this file. Just thinking you can take your InDesign file, you're going to go to a different computer and you're going to be like, oh shit, my links can't find anything. So you're going to want to get in the habit of, if you're moving things to different computers or going anywhere with stuff, package it and then copy it to your thumb drive, go to school, open it up off of this InDesign file that it's put in this nice little folder for you. If you're all set and ready to print, you can export the PDF like we did here, and then you can go ahead and copy that to your thumb drive. That's flattened everything into one file. So I hope if you guys have questions about packaging stuff or PDFs or export, we can go over it. We're going to practice this just so you guys do it before the final, and we'll look at these InDesign files that you guys have before the final so we can make sure if anything's off or if you're having any issues. Another issue that does happen, let's use this as a site plan, so just kind of troubleshooting. Like I said, if I can't find a link, let's close this. If I move this site plan out of its normal path format here, and I don't check my links here, and I go to File, and then I go to Export, and I'm going to go to print my PDF, say Final, or let's go to say Desktop, and I say Export. It will tell me, it should tell me that it's not able to find a link, right? It gives you a little bit of a warning. If I just say OK and I don't really read it, if I go into this new Rolling Hut PDF that I have, Rolling Hut 2, and I scroll down to my site plan, you can see it's all pixelated, right? So that means most of the time that you've had some link move or it can't find the path. And so that's really kind of a quick way to sort of troubleshoot. Just go back into your InDesign file, check your links, and you can see it can't find it. So if I bring that back and then I export it, it's going to work and it's going to look like the first export that we did over here with this site plan, nice and clean and everything. So this is a sort of a little bit of a short but kind of quick overview of InDesign. There's plenty of tools here that we're going to use. And one thing we can look at really quickly is if I go to File, New Document, If I left this facing pages on, I'll just go ahead and show you this. If I typed in 10, letter, landscape, all this stuff, it said new. So you can see facing pages is like a book spread, right? Cover page, open it up, backside page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. So when you're doing your portfolios, you're most likely going to do a layout like this, and we can go over more portfolio stuff later in the term if there's some time. But this is sort of the layout you're going to use, these facing pages, because most of the time you'll spiral bind in the middle here. You'll have your project description, a picture of your model, all of that sort of stuff. So that's sort of what facing pages is. And this is where sort of margins are really important, because, you know, inside margins, if you're binding something, you don't want to put the main content here. But we can look at portfolio layout maybe a little bit later in the term. But that's just facing pages. But mainly for what you guys are doing, because you're pinning up on a wall and your end product is pinning up on a wall, you can do the non-facing pages and kind of do a layout like this, where you get everything sort of nicely laid out. So if you guys have any questions, I mean, hopefully these videos are helpful, because you can go back and watch a couple things over and over again. Feel free to ask me or Corey any questions that you might have. We're happy to go over some of this stuff again, and we can touch on some of this InDesign stuff like firsthand in class. All right, guys. Well, if you have any more questions, again, email or ask me or Corey in class.